Good morning, everybody. There's a bunch of great speakers coming up today, and unfortunately, you're going to have to listen to me first. To echo Mar, thank you all for traveling in for this. We've got a great lineup today, and then, of course, we'll join you for happy hour after. So the theme of today is be brave and to build boldly. Part of the idea behind this is, in the media industry, it's not new that we're facing challenges and have an opportunity to grow our audience. But I think the urgency that we have to solve for today is greater than it's been in the past. We're also faced with some familiar challenges around large platforms and how we interact with them that maybe demand a different solution than we've proposed in the past to them. So that's what the title of this is. That's what I'll talk about today. First and foremost, this is about our customers and hopefully some of our future customers who are in the audience. These are some of the most amazing media brands in the entire world, some of the largest media brands in the entire world, many more than are shown here. Super proud to work with all of you. And obviously, part of that pride comes from the Washington Post as well, where we started, and we'll talk about that a little bit today. There's more in common between this group than people appreciate, too. Unlike other providers, we're working across all of media, new media, publishing, broadcast, large media conglomerates, and it's been really fun to hear the conversations among everybody, where really there's more in common about the challenges that we're trying to solve than there are different. One of the biggest things, so the call to action at the beginning of this, obviously is AI, but I think we've got a little bit of a specific bent on it. This you probably saw from the Reuters report, rapid advances in AI about to set in motion, a bunch of changes in the search ecosystem and the top of funnel that many of us depended on historically for traffic. And it's disrupting our businesses already, and if it hasn't significantly disrupted our businesses yet, it's about to. It also offers a lot of opportunity for all of us in growing a new audience, but we need to make a plan about how. The way we look at it is like this. We think about the traditional business model of media, and we see some big challenges. The first one comes from audiences, and specifically the audiences that come to us directly. If so much of our businesses have been built using large platforms as top of funnel, that direct traffic is a direct result of what we haven't done as much of, especially among the youngest users. And what we're seeing is, especially over the past 10 years, that direct traffic from those younger users is declining precipitously. The Reuters report basically shows it down now over 30 percentage points versus 10 years ago, even as among older demographics, that direct traffic is held steady. Second point, obviously, these platforms are not going to be similar to the previous wave of platforms. It's not going to suddenly drive a bunch of new visitation for us, a new audience. This is a problem that we have to solve now. It's going to get worse, not better. And the final point about this is, among the youngest users, people are already telling us what kind of user experiences they prefer. They're telling us as they go to ChatGPT, as they go to Perplexity, as they go to TikTok, to get their news, right? These are user experiences that, by and large, do not resemble many of the traditional user experiences that we all run. I think everybody sort of understands that, at least superficially, but I also witness, all of us maybe have a call to action to show more urgency in how we adapt our user experiences to that trend. So that's the problem that we see today, and it's all related, right? If we don't meet the challenge of the younger audiences and adapt our user experiences, we'll never be in a position to own the audience, and we'll see that audience continue to get siphoned off to large platform companies. You've probably seen this before if you've talked to any of our team. Joe Crony uses this a lot when he's framing up the roadmap and our product strategy. But the idea is this: Audience 1.0, many times when we're in media and we're talking about audience, that's probably what's in a lot of people's mind. It's a passive consumer. We're sharing content with them. They're consuming it from us. It's one-size-fits-all content. We created the content once, it goes to everybody, right? That's what allows us to scale. And of course, we sort of know that audiences have changed, but look at the far right, that Audience 3.0 idea. It's a very different audience, especially among the youngest users. This audience sees themselves as co-creators of the content on equal footing with our newsrooms. They expect it to be personalized and immersive. Right? All the arguments that we have internally inside our companies about how dramatically should we change our stance on personalization, they've already decided, the consumers have decided. It's a done deal from their perspective. The fact that they want multimedia and to be governed by them to participate in that conversation, those are assumptions that drive their ideas about how they want to engage in media. Now the onus is on us to try to solve that problem. In the meantime, there are companies that are solving for Audience 3.0. Who are they? It looks like this. It looks like ChatGPT, it looks like TikTok, it looks like Reddit, it looks like Perplexity, and many others. But I challenge all of us to think, how deeply do our media brands, including the one that I work for, truly solve this challenge head on? And so I think that's what today is about. Now, of course, those platforms still need content to work. That's been the history of the last generations of platforms. That's been that's what these guys need now, and we'll talk about that. So what it looks like is they need grounding. They need real reported fact to answer the questions that users have for them and the interaction that those users expect from those consumer platforms. And they're paying, especially what for our industry is a lot of money to get access to that content. Go a level deeper into this. Obviously, over the past couple of years, this has evolved pretty quickly. And so you saw the first cohort of publishers and broadcasters and other media companies go out and try to get money for the content that they produced. And in that time, from the large platform companies' perspective, it was really important for training. They were trying to improve their models. It's not long ago now that, ChatGPT 3.5, we're on ChatGPT 5 now. I mean, that evolved very, very quickly. The large public models emerged quickly. And training was a real need for those companies in that time. Training means feed more and more and more content into the training sets to try to improve the quality and the behavior of those models. But probably most people realize that it's to the point of marginal increased benefit each time they do another training run. And if you talk to folks inside these large hyperscaler platform companies, at this point, when they're trying to solve that training problem, they're focused on niche use cases, really select pieces of content like B2B content or internal content that they don't have access to publicly. That's it. From a training perspective, the models are very good at this point. That's distinct from another set of use cases, which is around grounding. And so without really announcing it, as we're having conversations with OpenAI, with Perplexity, with Anthropic, they're shifting their needs from training to grounding. Because what they know is as they build bigger and bigger consumer products and consumer platforms, they need to expect the unexpected. Any set of questions that users might ask, any unbounded set of interactions that users want to have, and a lot of it's about what's happening in the world right now. Right? So, they don't have access to that information. We do, through reporters. They need that information to make those consumer products run. And hopefully you see some similarities in that and in the previous generation of social platforms that emerged through the same type of content and amplifying it. They need that grounding content. You could imagine the model for paying for that content is going to change. We're already seeing the price suppressed on training sets, at least in cases where regulation isn't sort of forcing the price up. And from a grounding perspective, what you can ultimately expect emerging is something that resembles more of a programmatic marketplace for content, because we're going to be talking about lots and lots of content that changes all the time. And you're going to have a supply side, that's us, and you're going to have a demand side, which could be us, but especially is going to be these large consumer platforms that need access to that content. Here's a conversation I had with a senior exec at unnamed large AI hyperscaler in the last month. Their point was basically, for a lot of us that are running big scaled media brands, actually they're pretty happy with the national and international level content they have. Why? Because more of it doesn't help them improve. Once they know about a particular news event, the factual information that happened, they don't care about the very specific type of story we told about it. They're not sending the traffic back anyways. They have the fact that they need. And so at some point, the value of that content keeps going down. Imagine when we get to a world of a bidding marketplace around this, those prices are going to get suppressed. Conversely, they're very interested in niche use cases, in local content. They want unique information that they don't have access to today, because there's a long tail of questions and interactions that their users want to have, and they need to have answers to those questions. So that's a little bit of the context around what's happening with these guys, where folks are making money in the industry today. Closer to home, inside all of our companies, this is a report we co-sponsored with Digiday earlier this year, and I was actually really pleased with the results, because across all of our companies, maybe versus a year ago and certainly two, we're seeing great adoption of AI inside our newsrooms and inside our organizations. I guess everybody probably knows it's in fits and starts. There's culture change to work through. But what we're seeing happening on the consumer side is getting reflected in the enterprise. And it's happening especially in the newsroom. So you can see by these stats, especially the middle one there, AI is empowering journalists to work faster. It's obviously not replacing the work that original journalism needs. And it's freeing up time by eliminating repetitive tasks. It does, obviously, inside content organizations call to question what we're doing that's original content creation and reporting, and what we're doing that's production, story writing, editing, that more and more of these models will solve for us and the technology that we build around them. That's part of what we're doing at ArcXP. Anyways, there's outcomes that come from this. So for the CIO office, I think we're getting closer to proving that there's real value behind this software. And I think we'll see that increase as the tools get more dialed in around specific use cases. But there is a gap that I see in all this. It's hard to read these little words, but suffice to say, the stuff on the top, where everybody's saying this is where we see the investment going in AI, it's really focused on internal workflows. You think about inside media companies, how much of our culture is around what we do internally, creating content, when really we should be focused on the audience. If our competitors are these big platform companies that are building giant consumer platforms, make no mistake, when OpenAI is talking about AGI and they're figuring out how much investment they can make in infrastructure, behind the scenes, they're transforming into the next Google. They're building more and more consumer product that in some ways looks very traditional, and they're going to figure out how to build the new consumer platform, in this case, that doesn't send traffic to us, that just answers users' questions in place. And so those set of use cases at the bottom of this, that's what that's all about, right? So unfortunately, when we self-report on where we see AI being useful, our view of it is a little bit contrary to all the money and all the investment that these big hyperscalers are making. We're less interested in personalized user experiences. We're less interested in being able to answer questions directly for audiences as they ask them in a personalized way. That's the gap to close. And then if you've seen my presentations, you always see the slide that anyways I nicked from Joey. The point I think is there's a danger in all of us kind of gathering in this industry setting and just comparing notes on what we're doing inside our own company, even as outside of our industry, people are taking the eyeballs and the interaction away, right? The change is happening, just not always starting here. So with that said, for us at ArcXP and for the Washington Post, the big mindset shift is we need to put the audience first. And you've probably heard this in different ways around the industry, user needs model, a real focus on analytics and personalization. But it's a bigger shift than it should be, obviously. And it means we have to look deeply at what users are actually trying to do. I won't step through this slide in its entirety. This is a good one from Vineet as he started to explain the way that he's bringing about change inside the Washington Post, the CTO there, and you'll hear from him later this afternoon. The point is this, if we think that the big transformative changes in watching or in personalization, in some ways, we're really past that. We're in the realm now of consumers who want to ask. They want to interact. They expect information to come to them with the context of what they already know, leveraging first and zero-party data, with interactions that they've had with our brands previously. They want the answer to their specific questions, not the questions that we want to answer for them. And so, I think the idea of sort of starting with this chat solution really is just a path into a larger problem, which is how do we build media brands that are directly responsive to individual users' needs, not just segments of an audience, not your audience as a whole. So the vision for this on the Post side started with this idea of ask. News evolving, we need to stay ahead of pace. We believe in a world where the Washington Post is the most trusted and valuable resource for people to stay informed and understand the world around them. That's the vision that drove this. And then the product idea that came out of it was this idea of Ask the Post. There's a couple of pieces of this that I think now are pretty well adopted around industry, but we got there first, and to date, I think we have some of the best technology available of anybody for this, and we're bringing it to customers through ArcXP. The biggest thing is, this isn't about a chatbot that's simply talking to a language model. It needs to be grounded in our original reporting. And so, think past the days when we're just using a chatbot. You need that architecture and that infrastructure that allows you to ground all of the interaction and the personalization that you're doing with your users in your company's original reporting. The value of that fact-based information increases, not decreases. And so we built the system for that. And the bottom part, which is important, and I'll show a little bit about later, is it's not afraid to say that I don't know the answer. Right? A language model, it's a statistical model. It's going to try to find the best probabilistic response by stringing together a bunch of tokens to the question that a user asks. But that's not really what you want in news. In news, you want the right answer. You don't want the most likely response, including in cases where your confidence is very low. So that's something for us to solve for. If you go to the Washington Post website or app now, you'll see this, and we feature it very prominently. It's a new way to experience news. It's a chat-based solution. You can see we're solving for the problem of passive consumption as well as active interaction, and there'll be more evolution of this as time goes on. But I would think of all this as sort of an example, like a prototype of where this could ultimately go. Behind the scenes, we need to be able to deliver personalized news information for consumers wherever they are, whatever modality they want it in. And ideally, this is something we can bring across our customer base and across the industry. One thing that you see in this slide here, we've moved beyond simply that active model of asking questions. Now, within Ask the News and Ask the Post, we're suggesting questions directly in situ inside our article experiences. So even if users don't know what to ask, we see them dwelling on a particular part of the article, something that we've determined there might be a likely question they want to ask. And we're proposing questions or proposing more information. You can tap it, get a little bit more insight. Obviously, we're doing it in cases where we have more insight to provide and more original reporting. There's a lot of enhancements we're building on top of this product. Multi-turn, which basically means I have follow-up questions. I want to take the response you gave me and I want to ask for more information. I want to ask clarifying questions. And I expect that personalized response to be provided in a really contextual way that feels natural. We can actually do this now over voice as well, which Vineet was sure to remind me of this morning. So it's getting more and more natural, more and more multimodal. But again, going back to the last slide, I expect that the consumer experience of this is going to change rapidly over time. And the point about this, first, we're featuring it prominently. So if you go to the Washington Post app, it's a major part of the experience now. More and more, we're personalizing it. So that if this is the way you choose to interact with our brand, it'll be the entry point for you coming in every single time. This is an example of what I think hyper-personalization and the use of first-party data inside news brands could look like. It's probably not the only one. And I think the reality is, inside media today, we haven't answered this question yet. What's this? This is where I should have probably found a slide that showed where social media companies all started. The experience is, if you go back to the original versions of these apps, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, actually look quite different from each other. What happened over time was they all normalized around a pretty common format. A highly personalized feed, video experiences surfaced prominently at the top, in-situ advertising, the navigation bar at the bottom. That user experience became sort of this common lingua franca for all these brands because it was successful, right? They tested the shit out of it over time. And so that type of experience, I don't think we know what that is for personalized news, not yet. But this is where we'll have to get to. And it's going to have to answer the question of passive consumption as well as active consumption. I'm excited to see where this lands, but this is what we need to be more focused on inventing. The other point about this, so what made social media companies successful? Well, a user experience that was heavily tested and shown to work. But the other thing that made them successful was scale, right? They have huge sets of content coming from UGC from millions and millions of users around the world. So what does that look like for us? So here, I asked a question. I did this because we've got some folks from Paris in the audience. When's the next Parisian mayoral election? Pretty simple question. Obviously, this is reaching into the Washington Post's reported data set, and we don't have any reporting on the next Paris election. I bet there's folks in this room whose publications do. There we go, over there. I bet they do. I think as you start seeing larger consumer adoption of these platforms, we're going to see more and more questions that we're surprised by, that we're unfamiliar with, and that we don't have our own original reporting for. Right? The reality is none of us have the breadth of content or reporting to truly stand up to unbounded sets of questions and interactions from users. And the reality is the big platform providers, they're thinking this way too. Right? They're imagining what happens when billions of users are in Gemini, are in ChatGPT. They have the analytics. They know that they're asking huge amounts of questions. And they're looking around desperately, trying to find the grounding information to answer those questions. We have to think that way. If we continue to operate like an amalgamation of little brands, right, we're going to lose out to the consumer convenience that comes from those large platforms with access to that set of content. So that's the point between these two things, right? The user experience and the breadth. And I think those are the two problems that will be at a permanent disadvantage to these large platform companies unless we solve for those two things. So let's fast forward to the ArcXP side of things. We are trying to solve this problem. First is on the platform side. You've probably heard us talk about hyper-personalization. This is the biggest single strategic focus of the ArcXP company right now. We've done some work with customers trying to tease out, how much should we focus on this versus improvements to the existing product. But I think if you take the real existential challenge of what I presented earlier seriously, right, our focus has to be here. Personalization for us means, yes, the cases that are a little bit more mundane. Let's make sure we're curating a good set of content for our customers. We have an amazing two towers model, similar to what TikTok uses to help personalize content. We're bringing that to customers early next year. But our vision for hyper-personalization also goes deeper into personalizing the content itself. And that's more similar to what we just saw inside the chat interface. but surely a number of other products that will build around that same idea as well. We're going to need feedback from everybody here. One of the things that I've been saying to customers more recently is, please, obviously give us feedback. We get a ton of feedback from everybody. But more than feedback, we want your actual problems inside your business so that we can invent on your behalf. Right? Here's our strategy, but we need to know, what does this look like for you? What would success look like if you really got a young audience who wanted to interact with your brand constantly? How should we do that for you? Let us invent on your behalf. So this is one area of strategic focus for us. We've always done this at ArcXP, and we'll continue doing it with AI. It's not just kind of a SaaS solution or a set of tools. We need to build a platform underneath it too. The majority of customers and prospects here work for large media brands with their own product and engineering teams and their own strategy. We need to enable those teams to do their own innovation. One of our big kind of value pillars inside Arc is innovate rapidly. The idea there is not all of the experiments, back to that idea of what's going to be the common thread, the user experience is successful. Not all of the experiments that are successful will come from us, from the Washington Post or from Arc. We need the industry to participate and our customers to participate in that same type of invention. By supplying a platform for this, hopefully we can make it easier. None of us have unlimited budgets or unlimited engineering teams. If we can do the basic work of the infrastructure and the plumbing to accelerate your own innovations and your own experiments, hopefully we can get to that place faster where we really solve the problem for the consumer. Obviously, our motivation behind this is not just to sell more ArcXP, although of course we're happy when we do. Our motivation is we sit inside the Washington Post. Right? We don't get to get this wrong. If we think this is an existential challenge for media, that means it's an existential challenge for us. And so solving this problem, we have real skin in the game, in the same game that everybody here is playing. And it's so important that we get this right. Hopefully you can all see us that way and ask of us questions. How do we see it inside the Post? What are we reacting to? What does it look like with our audience? We're always going to be happy to share that information. So the final thing, I'll try to keep us on track today. Beyond talk, beyond high-level examples of this, we do have plans to start to bring the beginnings of this to market, basically the beginning of next year. And so what it looks like is taking that interactive solution, chat solution, we're branding it as Ask the News, and we're bringing it to market now. Obviously, in this case, it's not Washington Post content. It's each of your stories, whether it's running through Arc or not, with this purpose-built architecture that we talked about before, with trustworthy response, powered by real original reporting. Battle-tested user experience is true because we've already let this loose on the Washington Post audience. And we have millions upon millions of queries coming in from the real audience there, letting us know what's working and what's not. Even acknowledging that there's plenty of work that we have to do to keep building new user experiences and help making that more seamless. And in this case, the vision of where this goes for us is, ultimately we could pull together, in a way that we haven't before, all the customers in this room and who are not with us, so that we can answer more questions than we can currently, and that you can all answer more questions than you can with just the reporting that your own brands do. Right? There's an opportunity here to create actual ecosystem play, something we'll be talking more about as we get into next year. Part of that obviously means, news media brands need to be reimbursed for the content they share. And that's an important part of our vision too. That if we're all sharing content with each other, helping to answer the interactions that consumers want to have with us, there's a revenue model in that that's more sustainable than simply selling our content one-off to large platform companies. So that's the end. The point of this was to say there's real practical ways we plan to bring this to market right now. But the vision obviously is much bigger. And so my hope is you'll listen to all the presenters today, the work that each of them are doing inside their own companies or the presenters from ArcXP, and see where this could ultimately go. My hope is the next time we're having one of these events, we'll be able to show some of the results of not just the Washington Post, but media brands running across ArcXP, beginning to interact more directly with their consumers, personalize their content for them, and make some money from it that doesn't come from Google or OpenAI, but comes from their own companies. That's the vision. Please stay tuned for folks today. I told you the other presenters will all be better than me, so it's just going to get better from here. Thanks a lot for coming in, folks. Appreciate it.